Her resignation letter lay beside my whiskey glass, crisp as a blade. I stood at the head of the black oak desk while the ice in my glass clicked once, then settled, and that tiny sound seemed louder than the men waiting outside my office. Elena's envelope was cream-colored, the paper heavy, the kind she always chose for things that mattered. The lamp on my desk threw a warm amber circle over the page, but the rest of the room stayed cold, all steel-gray windows and polished stone, the city lights smeared across the glass like distant fires. I read the letter twice. 3 lines. No accusation. No plea. No drama. Effective immediately. 5 years. Reduced to a signature I knew better than my own. Elena Vale. Even her handwriting was controlled. No shaking lines. No bitterness pressed into the ink. That was what unsettled me first. Not rage. Not betrayal. Absence. It moved through the room faster than any bullet ever had. At 7:05 a.m., she had placed my espresso on the left side of the desk, exactly 2 inches from the leather blotter because she knew I reached for it without looking. At 7:07, she had corrected a typo in a shipping ledger before I could see it. At 7:10, she had reminded me that Councilman Reeves preferred silence before negotiation and that my blue tie made him defensive. At 7:14, she had handed me the morning briefing, each page tabbed in black, each risk distilled into a sentence sharp enough to act on. By 8 o'clock, she was gone. No slammed door. No scene in the hallway. Just a space behind the outer desk where her fountain pen no longer rested, where the faint scent of bergamot tea had already started to fade. I stepped out of my office, and the floor seemed wrong without her there. Her chair was pushed in. The monitor was dark. The silver paperweight she used to pin contracts sat perfectly centered, catching the overhead light. My men looked anywhere but at me. They could face federal pressure, rival crews, armed escorts in winter rain, but an empty chair outside my office made them shift their weight like schoolboys. "Where is she?" I asked. No one answered fast enough. Marco, who handled security downstairs, cleared his throat and said she had left through the private garage entrance at 7:42 with 1 carry-on and 1 coat over her arm. No escort requested. No car from the house fleet. She had walked into the morning cold alone. I looked at the calendar screen mounted on the wall. Every hour was blocked in Elena's neat architecture. Meeting, call, transfer window, attorney review, dinner arrangement, flight hold. The machine of my day still stood there gleaming, but the hand that made it move had vanished. I should have laughed. Secretaries quit. Staff burned out. People mistook usefulness for power and thought leaving would prove a point. That was the rule in my world. Replace weakness. Move on. But when I reached for the secure folder for my noon meeting, it was not in the drawer where it should have been. It was on the side credenza, already paired with a second file and a sealed note in Elena's hand for the Zurich call. She had prepared my day even as she disappeared from it. I broke the seal. Inside was a list of passwords to temporary channels, a warning about a delayed shipment, and one final sentence without a signature. You will notice the silence before you understand the cost. I stared at those words while the ventilation hummed overhead and the espresso on my desk went cold. For the first time in years, I canceled nothing, said nothing, and felt the morning open beneath my feet like missing stairs. By noon, my empire was running 3 minutes late, and I could smell the damage. It started small, the way a crack starts under expensive glass. The conference room lights glowed white over a table of matte black stone, and 15 men waited for me to authorize a transfer that should have happened 20 minutes earlier. A burner phone buzzed against the tabletop, sharp and insect-like. My espresso tasted burnt. The attorney on speaker kept saying, "We were told the revised documents were confirmed," and every time he said "we," every face in that room turned toward the empty seat where Elena usually sat with her legal tabs, her calm voice, her ridiculous ability to answer a question before it finished being asked. I took the call myself. Wrong channel. Wrong file version. Wrong courier on standby. Not disaster. Not yet. But I felt the rhythm slip under my fingers. I ended the call, signed the correction, and moved to the next problem. Then the next one came faster. Reeves's office was still waiting because no one had sent the flowers Elena always arranged before difficult meetings. Zurich pushed back because the encrypted line had not been revalidated at 10:30. My driver pulled the armored sedan to the wrong entrance at lunch because the route adjustment Elena normally texted at 11:12 never came. By 2 p.m., the headquarters smelled like overheated electronics and fresh coffee gone stale, and even the marble hallway seemed louder. Every heel click and printer hummed slightly offbeat. I told myself she was making a point. A woman that competent did not vanish for survival. She vanished for leverage. That was the logic I knew. So I refused to call. I refused to ask where she lived, refused to touch the private number she had used only for emergencies. I spent the afternoon correcting mistakes made by people who had never needed to think 2 moves ahead because Elena had always done it for them. When I reached my penthouse after dark, the elevator opened into silence, so complete I stopped on the threshold. Usually the entry lamp was already dimmed to the setting I preferred after midnight meetings. Usually the decanter had been refilled, the blue tie from the morning sent for pressing, the kitchen stocked with exactly the mineral water I drank after long negotiations. That night the apartment smelled faintly of dust and unopened rooms. One of the kitchen cabinet doors was still ajar from the housekeeper's shift. My cufflinks sat on the wrong tray. The dry cleaning bag I needed for the morning hung untouched near the closet because no one had texted the service. I crossed the living room barefoot on cold wood and found my personal phone vibrating against the counter. A message from a banker in Geneva. We missed the narrow window. Elena usually confirms personally. I stood there with the skyline flickering beyond the glass and read that line until the city blurred. She had not only left the desk. She had left pressure points all through my life, and every one of them was surfacing now, one after another, like bodies rising through dark water. I opened my laptop and tried to access a contact matrix for 3 shell intermediaries. Password denied. Tried the backup. Denied again. Then I saw what I had missed in the final packet she left me that morning. A handwritten annotation in the corner, tiny and exact. Temporary channel key expires at midnight. Renew if you can. I checked the clock on the wall. 11:41 p.m. For the first time, I did not wait for incompetence to fix itself. I grabbed my coat, took the service elevator back down to the operations floor, and told every man in the room to stay until dawn. Then I placed Elena's private emergency number on the table between my hands, stared at it for one hard second, and made a decision I had refused all day. Give me her address, I said. I found her in the spaces where my fingerprints should have been. At 12:06 a.m., while the operations floor glowed under strips of harsh fluorescent light and smelled of hot paper, toner, and stale takeout, I logged into the emergency archive myself. Elena had built the filing logic years ago, silent, clean, efficient, and for the first time I moved through it without her. Not to search for her, to keep my house from splitting at the seams. But every folder I opened carried her shape. Reeves' dossier, a note buried in the margin from 9 months ago, don't schedule after his brother's hearing. He drinks before bad news. Zurich ledger. A correction from last winter rerouting a transfer through a compliant intermediary after one of my own accountants used a name already under review. A travel manifest from Miami with a line highlighted in pale gray, rearrange return gate. Photographer at Terminal C is freelance and indiscreet. My jaw tightened as I read. The men around me kept working, printers spitting warm pages, keyboards tapping in nervous bursts. But I heard only the quiet accumulation of things I had never noticed because Elena had erased the consequences before they reached me. I pulled another file, then another. In one she had flagged a charity gala seating chart because a state prosecutor's wife was allergic to lilies and would remember any insult. In another she had crossed out the name of a temporary driver and written, no. Gambling debt. I approved him anyway that day. I remembered now. And 24 hours later cash from one of my clean channels had almost vanished in Atlantic City. Elena had recovered it before I even knew it was missing. I sat back in the leather chair and looked through the glass wall into the dark corridor where her desk stood empty. 5 years of mornings, flights, contracts, warnings, meals untouched until she left a sandwich within reach. Winter coats appearing before storms. Meetings moved by 10 minutes, so I would not cross paths with men carrying federal attention on their sleeves. She had not simply managed my life. She had edited danger out of it. At 1:18 a.m., Marco brought me the address. 1-bedroom walk-up on the Lower East Side. No corporate lease. No Moretti security detail ever assigned there. I took the page from his hand, and before I folded it, Another item slid free from the archive folder beneath it. A medical billing notice scanned months earlier under vendor noise so no one else would see it. Elena Vale. Recurrent treatment. Paid in installments from a secondary personal account, not from the salary line I approved. My thumb stopped on the paper. It was not scandal. It was worse. Proof that she had hidden her own burden in the cracks of my world so my world would never slow down for it. I checked the account trail. She had sold vacation days she never took. Deferred bonuses I signed without asking where they went. Shifted her own schedule on treatment dates so no one would see weakness in the woman who kept my empire standing upright. The room felt hotter. The collar of my shirt pressed against my throat. I had spent the day treating her departure like defiance, and now every document on my desk told the same story in a colder voice. While I ruled, she absorbed impact. While I demanded, she adjusted. While I slept, she kept the walls from cracking. I stood so suddenly the chair rolled back and struck the credenza. Heads turned. I did not care. I grabbed my coat, the address, the medical notice, and Elena's resignation letter, then looked at the men frozen under the white lights. No one touches her apartment before I do, I said. No calls. No watchers. No mistakes. Marco started to answer, but I was already moving, the elevator doors closing on his face, the steel walls reflecting a man I recognized less with each floor. By the time I reached the garage, the engine of my car was running, warm fumes twisting in the cold concrete air, and one truth had burned through every excuse I had made for myself. I had not lost an employee. I had driven away the one person who had been keeping me alive. Cold air rolled through the garage in thin gray ribbons, carrying the smell of gasoline and wet concrete as my headlights cut across the pillars. The city was barely awake above me, but down there everything already felt late. I drove myself instead of letting anyone take the wheel, one hand locked on the leather, the other gripping Elena's address hard enough to crease the paper into my palm. For 5 years, I had trained everyone around me to mistake efficiency for obedience, silence for loyalty, perfection for something automatic. Elena had fit so seamlessly into the machinery of my life that I had started to treat her the way men treated electricity in a building, noticed only when it failed. By the time I came off the FDR and cut west through the Lower East Side, my phone had rung 11 times. I ignored 10. On the 11th, I answered because Marco knew better than to keep calling unless something had shifted. The Rotterdam call was moved twice, he said over the crackle of road noise and fluorescent hum. One courier won't release the package without Elena's authentication phrase. I stared through the windshield at a red light washing the dash in blood-colored glare. Then stall him. We already did. A beat. Adrian, the West Side books don't match. She used to reconcile them before dawn. I hung up without answering. Tires hissed over rain-dark pavement. By the time I pulled in front of her building, the engine ticked under the hood like a cooling weapon. The place was a narrow brick walk-up squeezed between a laundromat and a bodega with buzzing blue lights in the window. A garbage truck groaned half a block away. Steam rose from a street vent and drifted across my shoes. Elena lived here. After 5 years inside my polished towers, my armored convoy routes, my private elevators and coated doors, she came home to chipped steps, brass mailboxes scarred by keys, and a hallway that smelled faintly of bleach and old radiator heat. I climbed to the 3rd floor and stopped outside apartment 3B. No guard, no camera, just a thin strip of yellow light beneath the door. I knocked once. Nothing. I knocked again, harder this time, my knuckles striking hollow wood. I heard movement inside, the drag of slippers, a lock turning, then another one. The door opened 3 inches. Elena stood there in a gray sweater with the sleeves pushed to her wrists, no makeup, hair pulled back wrong as if she had tied it without looking. She had always met me with a tablet in hand, a schedule, an answer. Now there was only silence and the warm scent of tea behind her. Her eyes landed on me, then dropped to the folded paper still crushed in my fist. "You found me fast," she said. I looked past her shoulder before I answered. A small kitchen table, a single mug, a pharmacy bag near the sink. "You left me my day arranged to the minute," I said. "You knew I'd come. I knew you'd notice the silence before the cost." She opened the door no wider. "I didn't expect you this soon." Her voice was even, but I saw the notch of tension in her fingers where they held the edge of the door. I had seen that hand sign contracts, move millions, dismantle crises with 2 calls and a look. I had never asked what it held when it went home at night. Get your coat, I said. We're going back. A small laugh escaped her, dry and brief. There it is. This isn't a discussion. That, she said, lifting her chin a fraction, is exactly why I left. Somewhere below us, a buzzer sounded and a tenant cursed into the stairwell. Heat rattled through old pipes inside her walls. I looked at her apartment again, at the cracked white paint on the trim, the stack of unpaid envelopes under a bowl by the door, the second-hand lamp throwing soft amber over a room no one in my world had ever imagined her inside. I stepped closer, and she did not retreat, but the chain on the door remained in place like a line drawn with steel. Elena, I said, quieter now. I'm not here to punish you. No, she said. You're here because for the first time in 5 years, something stopped obeying you. The words landed cleanly. No raised voice. No tremor. Just truth, set down between us like glass. I should have denied it. Instead, I reached into my coat, took out my phone, and powered it off in front of her. The hallway fell still without the vibration in my hand. I cleared the next hour. I said, no interruptions. No orders. Talk to me. Her eyes flicked to the dead screen, then back to my face, measuring whether I even understood what that gesture cost me. She opened the door another inch, not enough to invite me in, only enough to let the smell of chamomile and city dust spill into the hall. 1 hour, she said. After that, you leave if I ask. For the first time since she walked away, the terms were not mine, and I heard myself answer before pride could stop me. Fine. Radiator heat thudded through the walls in slow metallic knocks, and somewhere in the apartment above, water moved through old pipes with a hollow rushing sound. Elena stepped back just far enough to let me in, then closed the door and set the chain loose with a soft steel click that felt stranger than any lock I had ever heard open for me. Her apartment was smaller than some of my closets and more honest than any room I owned. A thrift store bookshelf leaned slightly to one side. A wool coat hung from a nail by the door. The window over the sink rattled each time a truck passed below, letting in a thread of winter air that carried street salt and coffee from the deli downstairs. I stayed standing. She did not offer me a seat, and I did not take one. Elena crossed to the stove, turned off a kettle before it began to scream, and poured hot water into the mug I had seen from the hall. Chamomile, she said without looking at me. You always hated the smell. You remember things I never said twice. That was the job. She brought the mug to the table and sat, but only after choosing the chair that left the other one across from her, not beside her. I noticed the pharmacy bag again, folded neatly now under a stack of envelopes, and forced my eyes away. If I reached for that before she chose to speak, I would turn this room back into one more place under my hand. Why here? I asked. After 5 years with me, you could have gone anywhere. She wrapped both hands around the mug, letting the steam cloud her face for a second. This is where I lived before I worked for you. This is what my life costs without your name attached to it. Then she looked up. You never asked. The sentence did not come like an accusation. It came like a receipt. I pulled the kitchen chair back. The legs scraped over old linoleum with a dry, ugly sound. Then I'm asking now. Her mouth tightened. Almost a smile, but not one I had earned. No, you're inventorying damage. That would have been true 24 hours earlier. It should have been true now. But standing in that cramped room with a refrigerator humming beside us and weak gray daylight collecting on the counter, I kept seeing pieces of my life with her fingerprints on them. A corrected meeting list. A call rerouted before an ambush of bad numbers. A blood pressure pill on my desk the one week I forgot it 3 mornings in a row. I had thought power meant never needing to look back. Elena had been the reason I never had to. I found the Zurich file, I said. Her fingers froze around the mug. And the Palermo ledger. And the customs memo you altered so I wouldn't sign my own exposure into federal records. The apartment went very quiet. Even the pipes seemed to hold their breath. You weren't supposed to see those, she said. I wasn't supposed to need them. I leaned forward, forearms on my knees, my voice low enough that it stayed inside the room. How many times? She stared into the steam. Enough. That isn't an answer. It's the only one you've earned. I let that land. Then I looked around again, not at the poverty of the room, but at the discipline inside it. Medicine organized in a dish by day. Bills stacked by due date. One pair of worn flats lined up beneath the coat. She had spent years keeping my world clean, while her own narrowed into careful inches. "Did you leave because you were sick?" I asked. Her eyes snapped to mine then, sharp and cold as broken glass. "Who told you that?" "No one had to. You went through my records." "I went through the wreckage after you vanished." She stood so quickly the chair legs struck the floor hard. The mug trembled. "There. That's it. You still think access is the same as care." I stood too, and the room shrank around us. "Then tell me what I'm missing." She pressed her lips together, looked toward the window, toward the weak daylight and the street below where a siren wailed somewhere far off, then back at me. "You are missing the fact that I did not leave to teach you a lesson." Her voice dropped, stripped of polish, stripped of office calm. "I left because staying had started to cost me more than my health." That was not a threat. It was not negotiation. It was the first clean wound she had handed me with her own voice, and I had nowhere to hide from it. A siren passed 6 blocks away, thin and fading, while steam hissed against the window glass and turned the city outside into a blurred wash of silver and brick. Elena's words still hung in the kitchen between us, sharp enough to change the air. I opened my mouth to answer, but my phone lit up dark in my hand before I could power it back on, buzzing with stored calls the instant the screen woke. 5 missed calls from Marco, 2 from Luca in logistics. 1 encrypted alert from a secure line Elena had set up 3 years earlier and labeled with a single grade so no outsider would understand what it meant. Elena saw the screen before I angled it away. Her face changed by less than an inch, but it was enough. "You said 1 hour," she said. I said no interruptions. "This isn't an interruption." My thumb hit the secure line. Marco answered on the first ring, breath clipped, voices moving behind him in the command room. "We've got a problem," he said. "A broker on the Red Hook route got approached 20 minutes ago." They knew Elena's full name. They asked whether the boss had lost his shadow. The kitchen seemed to contract around the words. I turned toward the window, staring at the fire escape slick with old rain. "Who?" "No confirmed ID. But they knew she's gone. And they knew you went dark right after." I felt Elena's attention on me before I looked back. "Pull every active route that passes through civilian ground," I said. "Rotate drivers. No one uses her codes again. Lock the East River storage floor." Marco hesitated. "That'll freeze 3 shipments." "Do it." I ended the call. The refrigerator motor kicked on with a low hum. Somewhere downstairs, a bottle crate clattered. Elena stood very still beside the table, one hand pressed flat against the wood as if testing whether it would hold. "They know," she said. I hated that she did not need an explanation. She had always understood the moving parts faster than anyone in my organization because she was the one who kept them from cutting me open. "Not enough yet," I said. "Enough." She crossed to the counter and reached for her bag. Movements quick now. Economical, practiced in a way I did not like. Not fear. Preparedness. "What are you doing?" "Leaving before they narrow the radius." "No." She looked at me as if I had said something stupid on purpose. "This is why I left clean. No forwarding address. No calls. No trace. If they tie me to you in motion, I become usable. You already are usable if you walk out that door alone. And I am a target if I stay near you. Then you stay near me where I can close the distance." She laughed once, without humor, and shoved a bottle of pills into her bag. "There it is again. You still think proximity is protection." I moved before she could reach the door, planting my palm against it, the cold painted wood flat under my hand. "This time it is." Her jaw tightened. "Move." "No," the word came out quiet. Solid. Not the bark I used on men paid to obey me, but something lower and harder because it was aimed at the one person whose leaving had already proved how powerless command became without consent. She stepped closer, eyes level with mine. "If you drag me back into your world, Adrian, you don't get to call that saving me. Then tell me what to call it." For half a second, all I heard was the rattling radiator and our breathing in the cramped room. She looked at my hand on the door, then at the phone still lit in my other palm, then back to my face. "Consequences," she said. I pulled my hand off the door and reached into my coat for the key card to a safe apartment 3 neighborhoods north, one only 3 people knew existed. I held it out between us. "Matte black. Unmarked." "Then let me deal with mine," I said. "You come with me now, or I put 6 men outside this building and announce to every watcher in the borough that you matter." Her eyes dropped to the card. Not surrender. Calculation. Anger. The choice had narrowed into something neither of us could pretend away anymore, and when she finally took the card from my hand, her fingers were cold as the winter air leaking through the glass. Cold air slipped through the cracked window and moved the curtain by an inch at a time, carrying the smell of wet brick and old radiator heat across the apartment. The key card lay between us in Elena's hand, matte black against her pale knuckles, and somewhere out on Delancey a truck hit a pothole hard enough to rattle the glass. I did not wait for agreement to become trust. I took my phone from my coat, called Marco, and heard the low static of headquarters before his voice came through. Lock down my downtown routes. Pull me out of the Thursday sit-down. No one uses her name on an open line. No one. Elena lifted her chin at that. Not softened, not impressed, just measuring the cost of what I had done. You canceled the sit-down? She asked. I moved it, I said, though we both knew that was a lie polite enough to wear a tie. The meeting had been worth millions. The men at that table would read my absence as weakness. I had chosen it anyway. She crossed to the narrow kitchen, bare feet silent on warped wood, and set the key card beside an orange prescription bottle I had seen earlier but not touched. The overhead light buzzed with a tired yellow hum. Protection near you is not protection, she said. It's a flare. I stepped closer and kept my hands at my sides. Then we don't bring you near me. We build a place they can't read. A burner phone vibrated in my inside pocket before she could answer. Not my main line. The emergency one. I took the call and said nothing. A man I had paid for silence in Red Hook spoke first, breath quick, voice low. They were asking for the woman from your office. Brown coat. Lower East Side. They know she left. They think she took something. Then the line died. Elena watched my face, and I hated that she knew me well enough to hear bad news in the way I put the phone down without looking at it. They found me, she said. No drama, no tremor, just the flat sound of a blade laid on a table. They found the gap. I corrected and moved to the window. Across the street, a man in a navy cap stood too still beneath a flickering bodega sign, a paper cup in one hand, eyes up for half a second too long. I drew the curtain shut. Get your coat. No. Her answer came fast and clean. I am not disappearing into one of your steel boxes, so you can station men outside the door and call that care. I turned back to her. This isn't about control. Everything with you is about control. The words landed because they were true often enough to bruise. I picked up the prescription bottle at last. The plastic was warm from the apartment heat. Her name. A dosage schedule. Refilled late. I set it down carefully. Then let me try something else. She folded her arms. I could hear the pipes knock in the wall and the siren of an ambulance 3 avenues over, fading under rain. Try what? She asked. I took off my watch, the one my father had worn, the one men noticed because they were meant to notice it, and placed it beside the bottle. Then my second phone. Then the gun at the small of my back, unloaded first, magazine on the table, metal clicking against laminate in the yellow light. Distance, I said. No headquarters. No public houses. No men in your room unless you ask. Just one secure place for tonight while I burn every route that leads to you. She stared at the objects as if I had placed organs on the table. I had never disarmed myself in front of her. Not really. And tomorrow? She asked. Tomorrow you decide whether I stay in your life at all. That changed the room. The radiator hissed. Rain tapped harder against the window. She looked at me for a long moment, then reached for her coat, not because I had ordered it, but because I had finally offered something she could refuse later. When she passed me, the sleeve of her sweater brushed my hand, and she stopped at the door long enough to say, If I come with you, Adrian, I don't come back as your shadow. I opened the door to the dark hall and answered the only way left to me. Then don't. The elevator shuddered as it climbed, old cables groaning above us, and the fluorescent light inside blinked hard enough to turn Elena's face into still frames. Rainwater darkened the hem of her coat, and the metal walls smelled like cold dust and machine oil. I had chosen a building I owned through 3 dead layers of paperwork, a former printing warehouse on the far west side with no staff, no signage, and windows thick enough to turn the city into muted light. Elena stood with one shoulder against the corner, saying nothing while I watched the floor numbers crawl. She had not come with me because I had won. She had come because the street had become more dangerous than my silence. On the 12th floor, the doors opened to a loft wrapped in shadow and amber lamps. Concrete floors. Heavy wool throws. A kettle on a clean stove because I had called ahead only once and told Marco to send supplies, not men. I took the burner phone from my pocket and set it on the island. You stay here tonight, I said. No one enters without your say. She walked past me, fingers skimming the back of a leather chair, checking locks, windows, blind corners. The city glowed beyond the glass in blurred red and white streaks. And you? She asked. I stay until I know the route is burned. Her laugh was quiet and sharp. That sounds exactly like a cage with better lighting. The phone buzzed before I could answer. Marco. I put him on speaker for one reason only. She was done being managed through walls. Say it, I told him. Paper rustled on his end. One of the Bronx crews tried to verify whether Ms. Vale is under house security. We fed them a false uptown address. They moved on it fast. Elena's head turned toward the phone. So now they're hunting ghosts, she said. For the next hour, I said. After that they'll realize the house is empty. I reached for my coat. She saw it instantly. You're leaving. I'm closing the leak. By doing what you always do when your world breaks. She stepped between me and the door before I could answer. Not dramatic, not loud, just planted there with both hands flat on the wood. No, I stared at her. Move, Elena. No. The room went still except for the low whistle of the kettle beginning to heat. If you walk out and return as Adrian Moretti the machine, she said, then this was pointless. I will not spend another year being protected by a man who only knows how to solve danger by disappearing into it. I should have pushed past the argument, called more men, tightened the perimeter, done what had kept me alive this long. Instead, I put my hand on the burner phone and turned it face down. Then tell me the rule. She blinked once, thrown not by anger, but by permission. The kettle clicked and began to hiss. No secrets where I'm concerned, she said at last. No using me as bait. No deciding my life in another room. Done. No demanding I return to your office as if all this was a staffing issue. The corner of my mouth moved before I could stop it. Done. She searched my face for the trick she expected and found none, because for once there wasn't one. Then she did something that changed the balance more than any order I could have given. She crossed to the stove, turned off the kettle, poured water into 2 mugs, and handed one to me with a steadier hand than mine. Steam curled between us, carrying the dry scent of black tea. Then here mine, she said. I won't go back to the old way. If you want me anywhere near your life after tonight, you change it. I took the mug. It warmed my palm through the ceramic, and I understood with painful clarity that I could save her body and still lose her completely. Then I change it, I said. She did not answer right away. She only looked at me over the rising steam and said, prove it by morning. Morning came gray and metallic against the warehouse windows, the kind of winter light that made the Hudson look like poured steel. The loft smelled faintly of tea gone cold and rain trapped in wool, and Elena's mug still sat on the island where she had left it after midnight. I had not slept. At 6:10 a.m., I called headquarters from the secure line and told Marco to bring the ledgers, the route books, and the standing authorizations to the conference floor. All of them, he asked, voice rough with disbelief. All of them, I said. By 7 o'clock, I was back in the tower with Elena beside me, not hidden in a back elevator, not slipped through a service entrance, but walking at my shoulder through the private lobby where stone reflected the pale light, and every polished surface carried the hush of men who understood that something had shifted before a word was spoken. She wore the same dark coat from the night before. I wore no weapon in sight. In the boardroom, heat moved softly from the vents overhead, stirring the edge of the papers stacked before my captains. No one sat until I did. Elena remained standing. That alone made 2 of them glance at each other. I let the silence lengthen until it turned heavy. Then I opened the first ledger and pushed it away from me. Effective now, I said. All personal route overlap with civilian addresses ends. No staff member's home is ever tied to operational movement again. No exceptions. A chair creaked. Someone started to object. I cut him off without raising my voice. The leak came through habit. Habit ends today. I signed the first authorization, then the second, then the withdrawal from the Thursday expansion I had been building for 8 months. Millions gone with the movement of a pen. Territory surrendered before someone could make Elena the price of keeping it. Marco stood by the wall, expression fixed, but I saw the surprise in the set of his shoulders. Elena did not speak. She watched my hand. The West Route contracts are frozen, I continued. 3 fronts close by noon. The river warehouse goes dark. Anyone with complaints can bring them to me after they explain why my secretary's name became street currency. The room chilled in a way heat could not touch. One man finally said, "You're reshaping the whole structure over a woman." I looked at him until he looked away. I'm reshaping it because weakness hidden as efficiency nearly got her buried under my mistakes. Then I stood, turned to Elena, and did the one thing none of them expected from me. I pulled out the empty chair at the head end of the table, not beside my seat, not behind it, but level with it. "You are not returning to work for me," I said. The words landed hard enough to stop even the air. "If you stay because I am asking for your life beside mine, not your silence beneath it." Her fingers tightened once around the strap of her bag. The sunlight found the edge of her hair and lit it like copper against the gray room. I reached into my inside pocket and placed a slim silver key on the table between us. Not a key card, a real key. "Lower lock, West Side Loft," I said. "Your name on the lease. Your accounts transferred out of my holding shell before dawn. No one on my side touches either without your consent." A few men in the room forgot to hide their shock. Good. Let them learn. Elena looked at the key, then at the stack of signed withdrawals, then at me. 4 or 5 years I had asked for precision, loyalty, silence, endurance. Never this. Never with witnesses. "And if I say no?" she asked. My throat felt raw from a night without sleep, but my voice held. "Then I still keep every change I made this morning, and I spend the rest of my life learning what your absence costs." The room went so quiet I could hear the radiator click behind the glass. Elena stepped forward, took the silver key, and set her old office key card down on top of the final and signed route book. "Then I'm not coming back to the old job," she said. I nodded once. "I know." Her hand found mine in front of the men who had only ever seen me close a fist, and when her fingers stayed there, warm and steady against my palm, I understood that I could lose money, territory, fear, and every convenient lie I had ever built, but I could not live without her.